In 5, 4, 3, 2. Oh, it's broadcasting. All right. We're live. Go ahead.
Okay, so let me share. Okay, so we'll see if this works. So this is just, can you guys see this? I should show my table. Okay, so this is just my main table, and I have topic 9, the JavaScript events. And events are just super basic. I kind of feel like we kind of all have an idea of what they are, but there's basic HTML events that we can add JavaScript to so that we can execute some code. So like you can have, when you click on a button, it changes, you know, it activates some kind of function, or when you load your page, or there's a few examples on here when you mouse over something or mouse out. And then on the mobile portions, and so here's the thing I didn't play with because I'm not familiar with DOM. I just kind of got the basics of it from other people demonstrating it. So I'm a little behind on that. So I just did a basic example here. So if I click this button, it's going to pick up the first line over here because I added an ID to it so that the function would pick it up. So if I click on it, then it just picks up that line item. So I can show you, I don't know that it's necessary in the developer. Oh, I'm not seeing them here. Oh, there it is. Developer tools, you can kind of go in there and see my code. If I click it right, there we go. So it's just a very simple one. I added an ID to this first line item, and then the function calls that ID and then displays it down here. And as you can see, I've started to work on doing the OnTouch, and I just got a little anxious, and that's why. So I went and met with the instructor, so I'm feeling a little bit better about it now and have a better direction. But any questions? I kind of feel like this is pretty much everybody already knows this. So
OnTouch is specifically for like a mobile or like a touch screen.
right, so you would do it on a touch screen, and there's a couple different OnTouches, and that's where I started to get confused because I was looking up to see if OnTouch by itself was the actual one, because they had it was longer than that, and I apologize, I don't have it in my mind. Let's see if I can find that real quick.
Yeah, no worries.
Oh, they had OnTouch Start. And so that's what I was starting to research, is like, do I have to put OnTouch Start? Is that separate from OnTouch, or do both work? So I was kind of looking into that when I had to jump into the office hours tonight.
Did you see what the OnTouch Start? I've never even heard of that. That's interesting.
So OnTouch Start, let me pull it. I'm only sharing this one. I can actually Google it the other way and Google it in this window, and then the one I was looking at didn't show up this time. I think because last time I Googled, I just put OnTouch, and then I found OnTouch Start. So then it got, you know, you go in here and you're on Touch Listener, on Quick Listener, and then I'm just like, okay, wait, that's too much. And I went back to just keeping it really simple. But so I think, apologize, I did have this figured out, and I just can't remember which link I clicked on. I'm sorry, I'm not finding it, but when I find it, I will share it with the group on the Slack thing. So. Any other questions? You guys could probably teach me more about it.
So I'm not sure, but I think with the developer tools, you can mimic on-touch events if you change to mobile.
Okay, so do I?
Let me just remember. So if you open the developer tools, up in the top left corner is the little two boxes. One of them kind of looks like a mobile phone. With that, it'll change it to a different. You can tell it what kind of device you want to mimic. So I think if you go into this mode, you can mimic on-touch events. So if you want to play around with it, I haven't tried it though. But
I will work on that, and I'll post my GitHub link back in here for you guys to check it out. That is awesome. I didn't used to use the developer tools, and I just the last couple semesters started to learn how to use them, and so I'm not as proficient.
yeah, it changes the way you write JavaScript.
Well, it's just nice to experiment with it and right there in the window and then go and fix your code. So I love being able to do that.
And if you ever get stuck and you want to see the code in execution like you would with an IDE, you can put the line debugger in. You just put the word debugger into somewhere where the JavaScript's going to run into your code. And it'll actually pause. If you have the developer tools open, it'll pause and let you step through the code.
Okay.
You can just click on the left side on the numbers as well, so you don't even have to write debugger in your code.
Just click in here. I've done that before where I paused it.
Right there. You can pause it. But you can do that on your JavaScript too.
It's up in there.
Yeah. So then.
Oh, look, that's very cool.
And then when you click that button, then it will pause. I'm pretty sure if you.
Oh, on here.
You have to refresh the page.
I have to reload. Yeah. And if I refresh it, am I going to use my tools? So no, I didn't. Okay.
No. Yeah, and then you got to fire the.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
And so how do I get it to play? I thought I would click
here. So the arrow going over the button is like to take you to the next line of code. And then the blue like play button is to continue running. They might not, I don't know. It doesn't seem like
it's not working.
Yeah, so there's down to the
Office.
Yeah, if you go down to the lower left, yeah, that one right there. Yeah, and then if you go up to the step over button on that, it should work.
Yeah.
Yep.
There it went. Oh, good. Thank you. I appreciate
tells you what your variables are and stuff. So.
Yeah.
Very cool. That's going to help a lot.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. I like the Chrome DevTools.
Well, unless you guys have any other questions, then I will go ahead and I will work on the OnTouch, and then I will post in Slack when I've completed that, so you guys can go and play around with it.
Yeah, I'm going to go play around with that.
I feel like it's something we're going to need. And we were talking earlier about how the instructor was saying that if you think about things you're going to do in the mobile world, if you think about what you want to do for your app or for the end of the class and use those as examples, then it's like more bang for your buck. You're going to have to do it anyways for your app. So why not do it for the topics and put it in there, and then you don't have to redo it. So just a thought.
So are we doing the app individually then?
I believe so, because I had asked him about my topic and, you know, if I could chat with him about it. And he said, yeah, we could start talking about it any time, and that would be good to keep in the back of our mind as we're doing the topics, what we're going to be doing in our app.
Okay. Except this app has no back end.
I know, like, yeah.
So it's not an app, it's just a web app.
I feel like you're just going to be pulling stuff from arrays or something like that, you know, because you don't really have any PHP behind it. So
yeah, it's just a JavaScript web page that looks that styled for mobile.
I'm going to make a shooter game then.
You could do everything in Canvas. I bet he wouldn't mind.
Okay, so
make the original Oregon Trail.
With Canvas. Have fun.
So I have never used Canvas before. And so when I logged into the meeting, he was talking to somebody else and he's showing Canvas, and I've actually never even seen the code. So I see it and I'm like, what in the world is that? So I start Googling it. I'm like, okay, I'm okay. I understand it. And then, but he was showing all these mouse overs and clicks and stuff. And at first I was a little scared. So, but then I'm like, okay, I can do it.
Yeah, it's a bit intimidating without libraries.
All of it is. I mean,
I was wondering if we make our own library, will he be mad?
No. As long as it's your own code.
Yeah, if I just make jQuery. Because I looked up how to make a jQuery selector. It's not that hard.
Well, then no. If you made your own code, then you can't get mad.
So I'm just going to dump that in all my pages and just use jQuery selector.
All right, who's next? I know Catherine is back on.
Yeah, and hopefully my connection is good. I don't know what's going on. So
Too much Netflix?
could be. I think we need a new router.
Oh, okay. Do you want to try and go then?
If you want me to, I can.
All right, who's the last person for today?
I think
I didn't
Tim.
put that.
Yeah, it's me.
Okay. All right, so we'll go you then, Tim.
So mine is pretty basic too. I don't know. And sorry, I've got dogs in the background and a baby, so ignore the background noise. Can you guys see my screen? So I was supposed to talk about, and let me make sure that I'm saying the right thing. So manipulating CSS class properties using JavaScript. Yes, I can zoom in. Oh, better. Okay, so I kind of felt like this was a really vague thing, especially since we're covering animations and transitions and stuff with CSS. So I'm just touching on the very most basic things. And I just pulled some examples from W3 Schools. So this first one, it takes, it has a style that is created with the class MyStyle, and that hasn't been applied yet. And then if you look down at your script down here, you have a function that runs when you click the button, and it applies this class name MyStyle to your div ID right here. So if you notice, there's no styling on the page, and then when you click the button, it adds some styling to it. The next example is a similar thing. Sorry, I'm trying to do this one-handed. It applies a style to your ID, which is on your heading. So my heading 1 with the ID of ID 1. If you look down here, document.get element by ID, ID 1, then it's the style, and then the color, and the color is red. So then it applies red to your heading. I've started working on my submission for this, and you can like show and hide elements in CSS, and you can get in your console, you can get, see what the style is that's been applied to certain elements. So, I mean, there's lots of things you can do to it, but I don't know, I felt like a lot of the stuff that you can do with JavaScript and CSS is going to be covered by other people with like the CSS transitions and animations. Do you guys have any questions for me? Could you hear all of that?
I heard it all. I don't have any questions, though.
Okay, great.
Good show.
It was pretty basic for me too, so.
Did you look at using JavaScript to make new CSS rules?
Yeah. And I started doing that. I was trying to get some code together to show you guys, but I didn't have time to finish it. And that was one of the things that I was attempting. But yeah, you can. It expands your options with CSS a lot. Lets you apply and unapply CSS styling to different elements. And Don's what Don was talking about. That's some of those things she talked about that allows you. What did you were talking about? Calling events. Yeah, some of those events allow you to apply different styles when certain things happen with those events she talked about.
Mm-hmm.
That's about all I've got for you guys.
Sometimes it's just simple and basic, and just figuring out how to show that our knowledge of it.
Yeah, well, and I'm really confused about the way that they have this broken down. Because, like, some of these topics, you can't really do anything with them without other topics. But then, so I'm just confused about how to show, like he said, show our knowledge with some of these topics.
You can.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just go ahead and submit some things and see what feedback he gives.
Yeah.
So I don't know what he's looking for. So
I would just do them together and then submit it and say that both of them are in there or whatever.
Yeah.
I did.
And that's
do
what
that.
the feedback has been for mine. He's just saying, like, combine a couple of the topics and you'll get up to skilled. Because right now I'm just sitting at working.
But you're not. You're skilled.
How long did he take to get feedback?
It was 1 to 2 days the last time I submitted.
Okay.
It's deceptive because you don't get like any notification in iLearn when the feedback comes in.
Okay.
Yeah, that's frustrating.
You have to like go and look at the feedback section because he's just appending more information to one feedback.
Okay. That is good to know.
And Catherine, you were trying to connect when I was sharing with them that I went to office hours tonight and started asking a bunch of questions. And he really said that you don't need to spend as much time on the basic JavaScript items because you're going to show that in every single thing, and it's going to be obvious that you know the JavaScript. And so he was kind of saying to spend a little bit more time on the CSS and the transitions, and then to be thinking about things that how you would do it in a mobile environment. So showing that you can change the whole page to another color isn't necessarily what you're going to do on a mobile app. On a mobile app, you might be wanting to show that when they've clicked on a button, that button's activated. And so you would want to use some kind of CSS or something that would, or transitions that would help the user to know that they are in that field or something like that. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but.
Yeah, that's kind of, I'm still, I'm just still confused about, and I don't feel comfortable enough with these topics to say like, oh yeah, I know what to do with that. You know what I mean? I'm not the only person that feels that way, but.
I think I'm right there with you. I mean, I understand the code. Like I can read the code and I can understand it. I just have a harder time expressing that knowledge and dreaming up ways of examples to do it. So I think that's what I have to focus on is just like, okay, where would I use this in the real world, you know, and how do I demonstrate that?
I would start, like I think somebody already mentioned, just start making your app and then say, you could just keep sending updates like, oh, this is what I've added to my app now, and this is what it's harnessing or, you know, working on. And then maybe just highlight the code, tell them, oh, it's in line from here to here or something like that. So then you can just not have to think of organic examples every time. Like, I mean, that's how I feel. Like I have to like come up with something every time to do an example. But I'm thinking I'm just going to start working on my app and then just have everything tied into it.
That's a really good idea.
Like one of the things that he was saying, because I was trying to write it down as he was saying it, was, and I don't remember what this related to, but he was talking about creating an object and how that's not all that important. But you could have a student object that had an array of classes, and then it just showed the classes. And so my app that I want to do is like a conference app. Like if you attend a conference, that you can see what all of the sessions are for a particular day. And so, so keeping that in mind, I could have it display all the sessions that day or something like that.
Yeah, why not? General conference.
There you go. I didn't think about that. It was because I went to a conference one time and they had an app and you could actually review, like send comments and interact with other people. And so I don't think my programming is at that level, but it was interesting to me. So I'm like, oh, I could try doing something like that.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Well, that's my idea.
You'll probably do it better too.
No. You'll do it fine. All right. Anybody else? Tim, are we ready?
Yeah.
You ready to give us the good stuff?
I don't know about good stuff. Let's see.
Too late.
All right. Here, let me turn my screen on. Okay, so I am doing transitions and animations. Ooh. So this is the CSS that makes things look fancy, except my stuff doesn't look fancy yet because I didn't make it too fancy. But pretty much, I'll go over transitions first and then animations. So transitions are CSS that will change from one property to another. So you define transitions. If I make my code larger. Can you guys read that okay, or should I pull up my IDE? We'll just pull this up. All right, so this is the web page that I had open earlier, but down here is where all the transitions are. So this is just basic styling for some classes, and then I made these special classes for my transitions, slide left and slide right. So we specify the transition, 25 seconds is how long the transition will last. And then the property that is going to change. So it's going to go from whatever the current value is to margin right 90%. And it's going to do that in 0.25 seconds. So if we go back to my web page, and I put that class being applied in an on click. So when I click on this box, it transitions to the margin being 90% for right or left, whatever one was. Margin right. Or, sorry, margin left. Getting those mixed up. All right. And so that's just a simple transition. And so then I decided that was a little boring. So instead, I was going to put in a mouse over 2 transitions. So this is actually 2 transitions, and I have an event listener for when one transition ends it swaps out the class on the element, and so it starts the next transition. And so it slides to the right, and then it slides back to the left. So we can see that here. So it's going to apply this class first on mouse over. It's going to apply this class, and when this transition ends, it will apply the second class. And so my JavaScript is up here. So on page startup, I grab all the div elements that have the ID of box, or sorry, class name of box, and it returns those in a collection. And then I'm going to use the array for each to iterate over that collection. And on each of them, on the on mouse over event, I'm adding a function. And first it's going to take the class list and add slide right class, which will start the transition. And then I add an event listener. And this event is listening for the transitioned event. And transitioned is fired when a transition ends. Transition end. Yeah. And so when transition end fires, it's going to execute this function, which will remove the slide right class, and it'll apply the slide left class, which will start the second transition. And we can see that in action like that. Every time I mouse over, they bounce back and forth. So it's a pretty basic application, and there are other events involved with transitions that you can listen for, but transitions really aren't good for doing multiple things at once. I mean, you can change multiple properties at once, but usually you're going to go from state A to state B. You don't really want to go back and forth or have it like it spin, like continuously spin, like stuff like that. You're going to do in an animation, because animations are a little more powerful and it's not as weird. Like, to get this transitions to line up, I had to add an event listener to wait for the end, and then, you know, make sure I got the timing right and everything. So for animations, which are defined differently, I'm going to use an animation, and I can call that animation once, or I can call it 10 times, or I can have it run infinitely. So here I have an animation. You define animations by using the @keyframes keyword and then the name of your animation. And then you're going to specify what intervals you want the property to change to. So at 25%, I want the property color to go from whatever it is to green. And then at 50%, I want it to go from whatever it is to red. So it's green at 25, so it's going to transition from green to red at 50. And then at 75, it's going to go back to green. So, also the margin left, but we'll worry about that later. So that's my animation I've defined. Now I can tell a class to perform that animation, which is what I do here in my color changing class. And it doesn't have to be a class. You can just apply it to any CSS selector. But I define it with the animation shorthand. This is the easier way of writing an animation, because if you don't use the shorthand, you have to write out each property individually. And I can give you guys a link for all the properties. It's right here. So there's a bunch of them: animation, animation delay, direction, duration, fill, iteration count, name, place date, timing. Or you can just do the shorthand, which lets you put them all in order and define the whole thing. So that's what I'm doing in my code. So I'm calling the name. The name comes first. The second one's going to be the duration. So 4 seconds is how long it's going to take for it to do that. This one is the, I forget what this one's called. Play state? No. Direction, which is kind of deceiving. No, that's not right.
I think it's the timing function.
Right. Yeah, timing function. Sorry. You got it. It is the timing function. And so ease means that it's going to start off slower. At the beginning and the end, it'll like ease into it. You can do linear, which I guess they're all displayed right here. So ease, linear, and slide in. So there's a bunch of different ones that time it differently. The documentation is probably going to be the best place for you to look for those. And then infinite, that is my iteration count. So I'm telling how many times. So if I change this to 2, it would do it 2 times, but I have it at infinite. And then we can see actually looks like down here. So I have an on-click event. When I click on this text, it's going to apply the class, which will start the animation. And it goes like that. So it's not pretty, but that's an animation. And because it's infinite, it's just going to keep going. And the total animation, so all the way over to the right and back to the left, is 4 seconds. And that's the duration.
Is this a very expensive process? Like, can you have too many of these on a page, or?
I'm not 100% sure, although it is native CSS, so it's not like you're running extra logic.
Okay.
Like you could do all this with Flash or with something else, but you don't have to load any of that extra stuff in. This is done with the CSS renderer, so it's better than alternatives, just because it's built into the CSS. Now, that being said, it is still fairly new. So to get full compatibility, you might have to use some of the CSS properties with the put like WebKit or whatever in front of them, because sometimes these things aren't fully implemented for the various browsers, especially like Safari and IE. They have like weird stuff. You have to prepend the property with -WebKit sometimes to get them to work. So if it's not working in a particular browser, you probably want to look into
Is WebKit all right to use then, I wonder?
For all right to use for what?
So this WebKit thing, that's like, what is that? Because you know, he's like,
so before there's official like definitions of a certain aspect of CSS or JavaScript or whatever, browsers, like independent companies, will come up with their own version. Like, we're going to implement it this way. We don't know what the standards are for implementing it, but we figured out to do it this way. So we're going to make our property, and we're going to put our name in front of it, WebKit or Moz or O. And so that's like a tentative feature that's planned to be released, but the official definitions haven't come out yet. So before it's officially added to the all like standard CSS3, it'll be added by Chrome, like Google or Microsoft or whoever. And that's when you have to use the prefix.
Okay. Makes sense.
So I think most of the stuff is in now if you have the latest versions. But if you need to do any backwards compatibility, you might have to
I see what you're saying.
do some stuff.
And so you learned all this from the Amazon, or sorry, the Mozilla website?
No. I used a couple different websites just to like introduce me to them that are more like narrative based. But for like the be all end all for me of like what officially is right or wrong for me is MDN, like Mozilla Developer Network. That is going to tell you exactly what is current and accurate. We use it at work as like, this is what is law.
Okay. I see.
Because like W3 schools will tell you pretty accurate information, but they won't
Tell
be
you
100% on some stuff.
Okay.
But MDN, like, these are the guys who are making most of, like, especially for JavaScript, they write like the definitions, so they know what's going on.
Okay. Interesting.
You did great. You're really good at explaining things, Tim. I appreciate that. And I'm good. This is a topic I actually know about, CSS. Anyway, I am presenting later on it, but I can share some topics or some resources ahead of time as long as you guys act surprised later. But there's one that has a page of all the different transitions that you can do, and there's samples of it. But again, back to me talking to the instructor, like, we don't have to do what, like, make the text move like that. You really want to look at like simple things that make it easy for the user. So it's not like you have to know every CSS thing or Sass or anything like that. So
Right. Yeah. So like, yeah, and you can animate or transition a ton of things. Like pretty much I read somewhere pretty much is anything that takes a numeric value, you can do a transition for. So something to think about. And my stuff was just, I don't know, things I knew I could do quickly.
But you did good at explaining it. I mean, like I said, I already knew it, but I still enjoyed listening to how you explained it and went through how the code worked. So it was helpful.
Yeah, the hard part for me actually is the CSS. Like I don't like mucking with CSS. It's very finicky in my opinion, and you gotta like find just the right happy spot, like 12% for this and 2% for that and stuff. And I'd rather just do the JavaScript. So I feel like all my examples are like, hey, look, I did all this JavaScript to do all this crazy stuff, and the CSS is just like, change this color.
Well, and for your basics, I mean, like if you're wanting to make something look nice, one of the things we did is like the million things you can do with the border property. But
Right.
if you have like Illustrator or something like that, you can do it in there and then just export it as a SVG, and then you have all that in there, and then you can just transition that. So that's kind of like instead of sitting there monkeying around with, okay, I want the corner to be 72%, you can just draw it and be done with it.
Yeah, I need to get into more of those tools. I've seen a couple, but I'm so used to just doing it the hard way. All right, well, any questions, I guess? Any more questions?
No, that was awesome.
Yeah, that was good.
Cool. Well,
All right. So see you guys next week then.
Okay, thank you guys. Everybody did
show.
good.
yeah, thanks.